Good evening and welcome to this, the 8th in the series of videos on Mark's Gospel. This one is about the temptations, and the reading set for this Sunday, the first Sunday of Lent, is Mark chapter 1 verses 9 to 15. Most of what I'm saying here has been covered in previous videos, and I'll put a link to those in the bottom. But it's worth drawing together the things that come around the temptation. Previously I was looking at the baptism. And there is a series of things that Mark brings into this story that affects our understanding of it. First of all, Jesus arrives as a student learning from John the Baptist. He is John's disciple at this stage. We need to look at exactly why I argue that. Jesus is then affirmed. It's as though we've got Jesus' humanity and then his divinity. We then have the work of the Spirit. Spirit doesn't come up very much at all in Mark's Gospel, but here the Spirit is guiding Jesus. Jesus is tested. And this is strongly in contrast with Matthew and Luke. So we need to be careful here not to get swayed by some of the things that they tell us about these events. Finally, Jesus leaves to get on with his own ministry, and thankfully that is included in the Gospel reading for Sunday, because I think it's a hugely important part of this section. But just to run over why I argue that Jesus is John's disciple at this stage, his student. First of all, when John talks about Jesus coming before he's arrived, he talks about one who comes after me. And that word episo is one that is frequently used of a disciple. And if this is not what Mark means, he is being very cavalier with his language. And one thing Mark isn't is cavalier with his language. He'll use just the same word as Jesus starts his ministry. The first thing he does is called Simon and Andrew, James and John to follow him, using the same word. So it would be very strange if that's not what Mark meant here. The Holy Spirit, mentioned he's at work in this, sends Jesus to be precisely where John is, in the desert. And then we actually come to the temptations. And we are told that Jesus is ministered to by angels. But that word has already been used, and it's been used of John the Baptist. Behold, I send my messenger ahead of you. And the messenger and the angel is precisely the same word. Once again, if they're not intended to be the same, Mark is being very careless with his language. Here, Jesus is tested by Satan. But we don't get the personal encounter that we see in Matthew and Luke. In Matthew and Luke, albeit in different orders, we get the three temptations of turning stones into bread, of throwing himself down from the temple, and of course of worshipping Satan. They are a personal encounter between Satan and Jesus, but that doesn't appear here. It seems to me that this is much more a testing, such as Job received when Satan is sent not as some maverick evil devil, but actually coming from the throne of God with God's permission to test Job. And if Mark has got anything in the Old Testament in his mind, surely at this point that is it. The final thing is Jesus is there for 40 days, a phrase which probably means an extended period of time. he was there for ages, we might say. But what is the prompt for Jesus to leave? It's John being taken off the scene. Now, this is not only a practical point. The teacher is taken away, and so the student decides that they've got to get on with the job. It's going to mirror exactly what happens in chapter 16. When Jesus is taken away, the disciples are told to go to Galilee, and Jesus is doing the same. The disciples are disciples of Jesus, and here Jesus is a disciple of John, and it is a cycle, a repeated cycle. So here we have Jesus very definitely in the desert as a form of preparation, rather than as a deliberately going out of his way to have a fight with the devil, which you could read into Matthew or Luke. As I say, this is a very human side of Jesus, this business about being a student. But Mark also draws in the voice of God, the theophany. Unlike the transfiguration that we looked at last week, this time the voice is simply to Jesus. It's private. Jesus is not yet revealed. He has not yet started his ministry. This is still a time of preparation. So the voice is part of that preparation, and it speaks directly to Jesus. Jesus sees the Spirit coming down. He sees heaven torn apart. Oh, by the way, one of the fascinating things about that heaven being torn apart is that the word for being torn apart doesn't get used in Mark again until when Jesus is crucified, the curtain of the temple is torn apart. The Spirit descends on Jesus, and we hear that voice. You are my beloved Son. This time it's not listen to him. This time it's with you I am well pleased. You're on track, my boy. Words to that effect. So really that's all I want to draw together for this. If you want to know more, go back to episode 5 and episode 6, where I look in much more detail about the ministry of John the Baptist, but focusing in the first video more around the baptism of Jesus, and in the second video, the ongoing presence of John through the gospel, in spite of the fact that for the vast majority of the time he's, after verse 15 he is arrested, but presumably from some point in the middle of chapter 2 he is also executed, but yet remains a presence. Well, that's video 7, so by all means dig into those, but I wanted to draw out the salient features that seem to affect our understanding of this passage as might be useful on Sunday. I hope you find it useful. If you've got any thoughts, comments, questions, please put them in the comments. Bye for now.